outside, I see the born of no return. Just ahead now, can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday again. Yeah, it's already middle of October 14th, 2014. My name is Gary Hendershot. You're listening to Wide Awake News on the Rents Radio Network. And tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. Now, usually you guys are treated to me, myself, and I doing a non-stop tirade on the various timely news items of the day. And, that seems to play well with some of the audience, and it allows me some therapeutic venting. So I get to, bark at the moon complaining about all my trials and tribulations. But tonight we're going to take a little departure from that. We're going to have an interview with a politician. Yeah, how about that? Now, I know how some of you feel about politics. There's, you go to the polls and you got, your choice between poo-poo and doo-doo. And, usually you hold your nose and, you vote for the one that stinks the least. Well, the last few years we've been blessed, I guess, with some alternative choices. I mean, we've got something called a Green Party. I think the perpetual candidate, Ralph Nader, ran for president, and I think he actually pulled enough of the vote that I think it caused some concerns. But there is also a party out there called the Libertarian Party. Now, I've held the Libertarians to task from time to time. It's like, all politicians. There's always going to be some things you like about their stated position. And there's going to be some things you don't like. I don't think there will ever be a time when you'll be offered a choice of political candidates or political parties where you can agree with everything that they do. But the idea is to keep an open mind, consider the options, and as always, make up your own damn mind. But tonight we're going to be talking to Jeffrey Carson. Jeffrey's running for a seat in the Congress that's currently held by a fellow named Jim Moran. I think he's been around forever and a day, and it looks like he's going to finally retire. That opens up that seat a little bit to challengers, because once an incumbent is in, they can and usually do use the power of their office to remain in office long beyond their year. But at this time, I would like to bring Jeffrey Carson in. Jeffrey does not have live video, so I'm going to be using, for those watching the video portion of this presentation, you will be seeing a publicity still for Jeffrey. Jeffrey, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm good, Gary. Thanks so much for having me.
Jeffrey?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, for a minute there, I thought I lost you. So how you doing tonight?
I said I'm good, Gary. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Now, you are running as the Libertarian candidate for the 8th District seat. And what geographic area does the 8th District in Virginia cover? What is your constituency?
Sure. It's Northern Virginia, right across the river from D.C. So you
Well, a lot of the folks that live in your district are federal government employees. Now, do you think that has an impact on your chances of being elected? I mean, coming in coming in with with your positions on the size of federal government might be something of a handicap with that demographic. What do you think?
Well, it cuts both ways, Gary. I actually, I will tell you that I think it's actually been more helpful than less helpful. On the surface, one might think that, if I'm getting out there and I'm talking about reducing spending and reducing the size and scope of the federal government, folks might get concerned about losing their jobs. And to be fair, I mean, that's obviously a concern. But the bottom line is all these people, they know how the sausage is made. All of these folks, whether they're working civilian side, military side, they know. I mean, they see it every day. They see the waste. They see the fraud, waste, and abuse, and they see the fact that this massive bureaucratic, monster, it needs to be reined in. There's no question. And there's, we've got a big spending problem. There's only one way you deal with a spending problem, and it's not by increasing spending. I can tell you that.
Well, Jeffrey, one of the things that often concerns me with the Libertarians is, I hear cut spending, and I like philosophically, I like the idea of cutting spending. But as with most politicians, my biggest concern is that when it comes to cutting spending, those cuts will come out of the areas of government that many people feel government should be involved in. For example, that pothole down the road for me that could swallow a Volkswagen. Now, damn it, the government ought to be fixing that damn pothole. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Okay, if I'm a good hardball libertarian, I guess I get out there with some asphalt and I just patch up that damn hole myself so my Volkswagen is safe. But, that's one of the things I expect government to handle. I hired them to do that. And of course, we've also got, I think at last count, darn near 50 million people that are dependent on some form of government handout in a fairly tough economy. So I would be somewhat concerned that these cuts would come from those areas that, that 50 million people out there are counting on, and guys like me, really wishing that they'd fix the darn water, fix the darn sewer, and plug the pothole that swallows up Volkswagens on a daily basis. Now, how would the Libertarian position on the items that I mentioned, how would they come down on those items?
Well, you covered quite a bit, Gary, so I'll do my best.
Well, it's a complicated issue. I mean, when you just willy-nilly start cutting spending, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to one day just snap your fingers and have 50 million people not get their darn food stamps? Man, you'll have riots in the street.
Well, why don't we start there? Let's start on welfare and welfare reform. Obviously, the Libertarians get a lot of heat because, apparently we don't care about the poor and, we just care about ourselves and we're a bunch of selfish jerks. Look, that's just not the case. The first thing I'll say about welfare is this. We do have a welfare problem, and there's no question that at the lower end, can we reform these programs to put incentives in the right place to try and get people out of these programs instead of almost encouraging them to stay with them for such long periods of time? Of course we can do that, right? But I can tell you that when it comes to welfare in general, my priority is going to be focused on the big boys. My priority is going to be eliminating corporate welfare, right? Handouts to big business, handouts to special interests, handouts to Wall Street. That's where I'm going to focus when it comes to welfare, because for all the politicians, for all the talk about folks in need and this and that, that's fine. But the vast majority of this money is spent on the big boys, and that's unequivocally, I think, where I could probably spend 30 years in Congress fighting that battle. I won't, because I intend to term limit myself after 3 terms. But the point is, you could spend a lifetime fighting that battle, and then maybe barely get around to the welfare reform at the bottom. I do think that's important as well, but priorities are priorities.
And what about my pothole?
Yeah, so libertarians, again, I can't really speak for all libertarians, so I'll speak for myself, and most of the time I align fairly well with the Libertarian Party, but not all the time. But to be safe, I'd rather speak for myself. So I'm not anti-government. I don't know many folks that are anti-government. I'm just anti-bad government.
Oh, I know a few.
Well, I know a few too. I'm anti-bad government. I'm anti-inefficient government. Big, massive, costly government, intrusive government, right? Overbearing government. There's no question that government should play a role in our lives. There's no question that the Constitution defines, very clear and set specific goals or objectives or powers that government should have. One of those is going to be protecting the citizenry. One of those is going to be providing for the courts. There are obviously a number of others. But to say that, because we need someone to fill in the pothole, we need what we have today, it's obviously a drastic overstatement, and it's just false. There's no question that we need to, if there's a spectrum of big government and small government, right, or no government and big government, we are way at the extreme end of the spectrum towards big, massive, overbearing, costly, intrusive government, and we've got to do something about that. So libertarians, no question, we all want to go in the other direction. If you elect a few of us, that doesn't mean tomorrow we're all going to wake up and in no government land. But we definitely need these voices, especially in Congress today, trying to get us headed back in the other direction, in the right direction.
Speaking to that issue, I agree that when you compare the 2 primary parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, or the Republicrats and the Demopublicans, or whatever, the red team and the blue team.
There you go.
It doesn't really seem to matter. They are both leading us headlong into a pick it. It's either a fascist state or a communist state. It's really hard to tell. It's more like they're leading us into a corporatist state. But
That's right.
the intrusions on personal liberties, something that government was, according to the Constitution, founded to ensure for us and our posterity.
That's right.
Seems to have become kind of a really low priority in the last 50 years or so. Now, I'm gonna ask you. This is a loaded question, and frankly, you don't have to answer it. You can tell me to go to hell. But just suppose you were offered a one-way trip in Mr. Peabody's time machine, or maybe Dr. Who came by with his TARDIS and offered you a one-way trip. At what point in history would Jeffrey Carson go back to try to change something where you think we went wrong? Where did we get off the track?
What a great question. I'm going to have a few questions for you too, Gary, just heads up. I think you have to go back to 1913, and you have to go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax. The Federal Reserve in particular. I think that really paved the way for much of what we see today, a whole lot of what we see today. The Federal Reserve. And to be clear, at the time, let's make sure we've all got the context. At the time, the Federal Reserve was never ever meant to be what it is today, where it basically runs the economy, right? It controls the economy. It's got a monopoly on our debt markets. It's got a monopoly on our currency. It's Janet Yellen says one thing, the market goes up. She says another, market goes down. Global markets, one way or the other. It's kind of crazy what we have today. The power that this entity controls. But at the time, it wasn't supposed to be that way. It was only supposed to be a lender of last resort. So, if there was a banking crisis of some sort, the Federal Reserve would open up its discount window, and banks could go in and get loans for a mark above the market rate, right? A penalty rate, if you will. But it just ensured that there was going to be no crazy bank runs, or that was the idea anyway. Well, it didn't take long for the Federal Reserve to usurp more and more power, and obviously now we have what we have today, which is this massive privately owned entity, by the way, not technically a part of the federal government, not owned by the taxpayers. It's owned by the big mega banks, basically, and not just U.S. mega banks. So I would go back there. I would go back to 1913, and I think it was either Christmas Eve or it was sometime over Christmas break when that bill was passed with Congress out. Congress was absent. They were gone home. They had gone home, and they snuck that one through. But we fought the idea of a central bank for over 100 years in this country, and then in 1913 those forces were able to pull it off. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you go back to that point, you stop it from happening, but you just delay the inevitable. I don't know, but that seems like a good place to start for me.
Yeah, I think I probably would have gone back to 1878, but that's personal. And I might even have gone back to 1858 with a load of AK-47s and a whole bunch of ammo and given it to the right guys. But looking at today, okay, I think you hit a chord with many in the audience who would agree with you that the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor does it have any reserves except the future taxes of my children, my grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren.
That's right.
So I'm sure there is some sympathy for that argument. But looking at the way things are right now, how would you kill that dragon? Because at this point, that is the lion's share of the gross domestic product of the United States. About 45% of the GDP in the United States is bankers moving money from one pile to another. Has nothing to do with making anything. Has nothing to do with creating anything. Has nothing with producing products that people in the world might actually want to buy. I mean, let's face it. The very libertarian economics of concurrent of administrations for the last year is really why our economy is in such a bad condition right now. That's why all our manufacturing is skirted the country. We've taken on free trade as a mantra instead of fair trade. Consequently, all the good jobs that used to support a healthy middle class are now in China and in India instead of here. So how does the libertarian kill that beast without totally destroying what little bit of economic activity there is in the United States? And what would a libertarian do to try and claw back some of those jobs that have left the country in the name of free trade?
Okay. Well, first I have to take issue with the fact that I think you implied that recent administrations have been libertarian with their economic leanings. Is that
well,
we're in this mess because of libertarian economic ideas?
I think both the Republicans and the Democrats have taken a page out of some of what passes for libertarian philosophy by implementing this globalism, this globalist approach. I mean, drop the borders, the free trade mantra as opposed to fair trade seems to come from the libertarian camp.
Well, okay. So one, we have our borders are as secure as they've ever been today. Two,
some would argue that.
Well, they can argue it, but there's no question we put more resource into border security today than we have at any point in time.
Well, we're spending more money, but we're not doing it the way Eisenhower did it.
Okay, fair enough. I also free trade for all the folks that say we have free trade. We don't have free trade. Far from it. So that's just not the case. As a libertarian, I argue for free trade. I think the government should not be involved in markets, and it should not be involved in putting up barriers to entry or protective tariffs. I think that just does more harm than good. I think it's pretty clear that the government has been responsible for a lot of the calamities. What's the word? A lot of the problems we see today in our economy. In fact, most of them, I would argue. Let's take a look at that financialization.
Jeffrey,
that you referenced.
we're gonna come up on a break here in just a matter of seconds. So
sugar.
You might want to compose yourself, and let's complete that argument. Well, I'm not hearing the music. Maybe my iPad's a little bit slow. There it is. All right, Jeffrey, please do hold on. Be patient while they sell some product at the studio. And to the audience, we'll be back in just a few minutes with some more barking at the moon. Please do stand by. All righty, and we're back from that blatantly commercial interruption in the evening's festivities. Well, now, all right, come on, Brett. Okay. Yes, I am back.
And we're jamming.
I think I'm back. Maybe my audio wasn't getting to the studio. I'm not sure, but I think I'm back. In any case, when we got interrupted, we were talking about fair trade versus free trade, and okay. I'm not. Okay, now. Technical problems, I think. All right, now I think I'm sending audio at this point. That was fat fingers on the mixer, and my fault. In any case, Jeffrey, we are back on the air now. In my haste to try and mute audio so that you didn't have to hear all the music and all the advertisements, I think I hit the wrong set of buttons and killed us when we were. That's why they keep breaking in with the music. In any case, we were talking about fair trade versus free trade, and I did want you to have an opportunity to finish your argument on that one. Yeah,
sure. And first of all, the music's great, man. Gary, I was jamming, so it's all good with me.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to pick up my cue and punch just the right button at just the right time.
Well, there you go. That's why
Hey, it's operator headspace error. I'll take the heat. It's my fault.
Gary, that's my argument exactly. Complexity is a killer, right? And government loves complexity. There you go, right? That's why we want to keep things simple. So fair trade and free trade. Look, I don't. I think anyone that thinks the government should be playing a role here when it comes to companies trading goods with one another or conducting business, I don't see it. I don't have that much faith in government to come in and do the right thing or do the thing that's good for all parties economically. I think the government needs to stay the heck out of it, and then ultimately we will see a better outcome economically for all parties.
Well, let's take a specific example. Okay, we've got this NAFTA treaty, which a lot of people point the finger at and say, there's that giant sucking sound that Ross Perot was talking about with all the jobs being sucked south. And, Ross Perot now seems to be prophetic in his accuracy. It seems it happened. Now, how would the Libertarians deal with something like a NAFTA where it appeared under that treaty we basically gave away a lot of our heavy manufacturing to India, China, and of course, south of the border?
Well, Gary, I know that NAFTA, the title is North American Free Trade Agreement, but I think the vast majority of libertarians will tell you, I will as well, there's nothing that was necessarily free trade about it. So I think most libertarians you talk to will say they're not a fan of NAFTA, not by a long shot. Does that answer your question? I'm not a fan of NAFTA. I don't think we should have gone forward. But I think it's for different reasons between you and I. But nevertheless, there wasn't, just because the name is North American Free Trade Agreement does not mean there was free trade involved. So,
I should give you an opportunity to mention items that you think should be on the bullet point list. I mean, obviously, you've got some heartfelt issues that are important to you. Otherwise, you would not be putting your time and money into to running a race for this seat. What items are really on the hot list for you?
Well, before I get there, Gary, I want to touch on I want to answer or at least touch on something you brought up a minute ago, which was the financialization of our economy, and obviously the role that the big banks play and the ever expanding power that they have. This is not due to a lack of regulations by any means. This is not due to a lack of regulators on Wall Street. I mean, we had thousands leading up to 2008. We had a Federal Reserve saying that all was well, that there's no problem in subprime, don't worry about it, go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning, everything's going to be just fine. And you could see what happened there, in 2007, 2008 with the subprime crisis that led to the home crisis, the mortgage crisis, and then obviously that affecting the rest of our economy and the global economy, of course, as well. And then, instead of solving the problem, we went to Dodd-Frank, and in a nutshell, Dodd-Frank didn't solve too big to fail. It institutionalized the idea of too big to fail. Now you've got the big banks are bigger than they were. They're fewer in number. They've got derivatives books that are far larger than they were before, meaning that they have more risk on their books than they did before. And one thing that folks need to keep in mind, it was government policy that got us to this place. It wasn't just policy leading up to 2008 or policy after 2008. The S&L crisis in the late 80s with the Federal Reserve playing a role there, and then long-term capital management in the late 90s. That might have really been the turning point when long-term capital management, which was a money market fund, a money market fund or a mutual fund, one of the two, I forget. Forgive me. When long-term capital management went bust, and the Federal Reserve came in and said, no, it's all right, we're going to bail you out. That was basically open season. Everybody on Wall Street now got the memo, which was if you have enough friends if you have enough friends, right, and you're politically connected enough, and enough people are going to lose money, you can't go bust, right? So what's the incentive now? Well, the incentive now is to get as big as possible, and to go for broke, right? Pursue profits like crazy. Forget about risk. Forget about what's good for your customer. Forget about any of that stuff. None of it matters. All that matters is that you accrue profits as much as you possibly can, and if you get too risky, it doesn't matter, because you know what? No one's gonna let you go down. So what did we have ultimately in 2007, 2008? We had every big bank under the sun following the same playbook, which was let's go for broke, let's go crazy, and let's buy all these ridiculously overvalued mortgage-backed securities. These mortgage securities. And let's sell those to the rest of the world. I mean, it was just nuts. But it was nuts. It wasn't just nuts that started at Wall Street. Wall Street was taking its cues from the federal government and from the Federal Reserve. We have not gotten here because we've, for somehow, some way, Republican presidents and Democratic presidents have pursued libertarian economic ideals or deregulation. Far from it. So I just wanted to make
the biggest problem I see right now is at this point, the banks appear to be, like junkies. I mean, if all of a sudden the loosey-goosey Fed Reserve money stopped being available, that 40 to 45% of the GDP that's involved with bankers moving money from one pile to another would very quickly disappear, and we'd have an economy that would shrink almost half of what it is today.
Well, there's no question that, there's no such thing as a free lunch, Gary. I mean, folks go back to 2008 and they will say, if we hadn't bailed out the banks, then the whole world would have ended. The whole world would have collapsed. I don't think that's the case. I think we'd had to deal with some pain, no doubt. But you know what would have happened?
You'd have had some banks that went bankrupt. Okay,
well, that's
happened
exactly.
before. It's
So
no
that
big
all
deal.
all those bad actors would have gone out of business. And
Problem is,
in the
right now
financial-
we're no longer depositors. Now all of a sudden we are investors in the bank, and if the bank goes bankrupt, we're like any other investor. We're last in line.
Yeah, look, there's no question. I think, and it's unfortunate, but I think we've got some pain ahead of us. The longer we delay it, the longer we keep printing money out of thin air and funneling it to the big banks, and calling it fancy words like quantitative easing. The longer we keep doing this nonsense, the more painful it's going to be down the road.
All righty,
we need
Jeffrey,
to cut this out.
I'm hearing the music in the background, so we are going to have to take a quick break here. Let the studio sell some more product, and we'll be back right after these important commercial announcements. Stand by. All righty, we are in our last segment with Jeffrey Carson. Once again, I want to mention that Jeffrey has a website. It's jeffreycarson.com. That's JEFFREYCARSON.com. He is running for the 8th Congressional District in the state of Virginia, covering Northern Virginia. This is the seat being vacated by the retiring Jim Moran. And Jeffrey, you had some thoughts on spending that you wanted to get out there.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think too many folks out there are going to disagree with me on this one, but look, we've got a spending problem. There's no question about it. We've got a spending problem, and we've got a debt problem, and they're big problems. And if we keep kicking the can down the road, they're not going to solve themselves. And I find context is helpful, Gary. So if I may, I'm just going to provide some data points. First one is in the year 2000. Our spending levels, right? Overall spending levels for the federal government, year 2000 was about 1.7 trillion. Today, it's twice that. It's a little over 3.5, which means that it took us 224 years to get to the level of spending we had in 2000, and we have doubled it in 14 years. If you want to talk about debt, we had about $4.5 trillion in debt in the year 2000. We have quadrupled our debt. We're at just shy of 18 trillion at this point today.
And that's what's on the books that we can see.
Exactly. That's just the debt that we've accumulated to date. I mean, forget about unfunded liabilities. Forget about the fiscal gap, right? Which not a lot of folks are aware of, or even it doesn't get mentioned in the media too much. But good golly, that's in the tens of trillions. That's massive.
Yeah, as one of those fellows that's paid into this Ponzi scheme called Social Security for about 50 years now, with the idea that I might someday see a return on all that money that I gave Uncle Sugar. That unfunded liability hits close to home.
The Social Security, specifically the 2014 Social Security Trustees Report, just came out a few months ago, and in it, it's somewhat hidden, so you have to actually do some digging. But in it, the trustees clearly denote that 24.9 trillion is the unfunded liability that is Social Security, or that encompasses Social Security right now. The trust fund is in the hole, 24.9 trillion bucks. When Republicans and Democrats come to the table and they talk about, they're not coming to the table when it comes to entitlements right now. That's clear, right? They're passing that buck. But when they talk about this, Social Security in particular, when they talk about Social Security and say, well, we might have to maybe reduce some benefits, just a few, maybe means test, or maybe raise the retirement age just a hair. When Democrats come in and say, well, maybe we just have to raise taxes a little bit, but not a whole lot, they're full of it. There's no way you make up that $25 trillion gap by, fringe changes on the edges, when it comes to benefits or taxes. You've got to reduce benefits significantly. You've got to raise taxes significantly if you want to fill that gap. There's no other way around it. Or you can
just get the Federal Reserve to run those presses for an extra 10 minutes,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right. I mean, hey, if they're printing for the big banks, why can't they print for seniors? It's a great point. But back to my sorry, back to my point about spending. We've got a spending problem. We've got a debt problem. I am, without question, I'm the only candidate in my race that wants to reduce spending overall. That is to say, reduce on net spending, and I want to pass a balanced budget amendment. I'm the only candidate that wants to do that as well. So, I am, in a nutshell, the only fiscal conservative in my race, and it's not even close. I mean, the Republican wants to spend more. The Democrat wants to spend way, way more. These guys just want to keep kicking this can down the road because, they don't want to face facts. Well, the fact is 2 + 2 is 4. It's not 17.9 trillion. And I'm the only candidate in this race that's willing to accept that and be honest with the American people and say, look, we've got to tighten our belts, folks. We've got to do the right thing here. And one more thing on this. For context, Gary, we had the same problem, 7 decades ago. When the last time our backs were up against the wall, to the extent that they are today, when it comes to debt, was right after World War II. And after World War II, the leadership at that time, the greatest generation, they didn't come and start pointing fingers and playing partisan politics and slinging mud. They came and they said, look, we've got the spending problem, we've got this debt problem, we've got to do something about it. They reduced spending in 1946 by over 60%. That's like reducing spending by $2 trillion today. They reduced spending like gangbusters. And what did we see over the subsequent 2 decades? From 46 to 66, we saw a generation of economic growth that we haven't seen since the late 1800s, since the 1870s. Right? We saw 5% GDP growth on average during that time period. And that's after they reduced spending by 60%. I'm not calling for reducing spending by 60% today. Obviously, that might be a bit extreme, but I do believe we have to reduce spending. There's no other way around this. And I'm the only guy that's calling it like it is and saying that we need to also pass a balanced budget amendment because Congress has clearly shown that it does not have the wherewithal or can handle the responsibility to spend as recklessly as we've given it, the power to do. It can't handle the responsibility. We need to take it from it. Period.
Well, there is another issue that we wanted to discuss, and I'm looking at the time, and we've got about 7 minutes left in this segment before they pull us out of here with the hook.
Okay.
We've got an issue that some would refer to as foreign policy. I would probably liken it to Empire USA. You apparently have some thoughts on our so-called foreign policy or lack thereof. What are your thoughts on that issue?
I could spend an hour here, Gary.
We've only got about 6 minutes, so you're going to have to give me the executive summary.
Executive summary. One, I'm a former Army captain and Iraq vet. I've been to the region multiple times, first working with the Israelis, training working alongside Israeli Defense Forces, helping them set up their missile defense systems. Next, as a ground liaison officer, where I briefed fighter pilots that would fly missions over Iraq and Afghanistan supporting our guys on the ground. I was all over the region. I was on carriers. In addition to those experiences, I went back to the region years later, out of uniform, just as a civilian with a backpack, spent 2 months backpacking through the region for no other reason than just to try and better understand the region and the people and the history and the culture. If there is a subject matter expert on foreign policy, and in particular in the Middle East, and it's an incredibly complex region, so take that with a grain of salt. But if there is one in this race today, it's me, hands down. I will tell you that libertarians are not isolationists. We're not pacifists. I'm surely not a pacifist. But when it comes to military intervention, we have to absolutely show restraint. And I think the war on terror, the last 13 years of the war on terror, if it's taught us nothing, it should have taught us by now that we are not going to win this quote unquote war on terror with more bombs, with more bullets, with more drones, with more military intervention and escalation. It's just not going to happen. If you look at the last 13 years, you can very clearly see a pattern of things getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Today we've got failed states as far as the eye can see. Iraq is a failed state, Libya is a failed state, Syria is a failed state, Afghanistan is teetering. It's been teetering for a very long time. And to be clear, whether we leave tomorrow or 10 years from now or a generation from now, Afghanistan is going to fall back into civil war. There's no way to get around that. We've got anti-American sentiment at an all-time high. We've got terrorist attacks on the rise, not on the decline. And this is data pre-ISIS. We over the last 13 years, terrorist attacks globally have increased fourfold since 2001. And then, of course, finally, the icing on the cake, we've got ISIS. We thought Al Qaeda was bad. Now we've got ISIS, right? And it's a horrible Islamist radical group that controls large sections of Iraq and Syria. The president and his team and the neocons on the right, even worse, they're talking about, well, we're going to be, doing this bombing campaign in Syria now and Iraq, and we're going to be teaming with the moderate rebels, who, by the way, already denounced...
What moderate rebels?
Yeah, and they already denounced our plan to bomb ISIS in Syria. Our partners had just said, this is not a good idea, America. We don't want any part of this.
Where do we get off bombing a sovereign nation who has not joined us in a coalition? Where do we get off doing that in the first place?
It's nuts, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to partner with the moderates, but we're not going to partner with Assad or the Iranians or the Shia militias.
Hey, did you hear the latest? I understand we're now going to have a no-fly zone over Syria, because ISIS has got all those MiGs. Yeah, right.
God, a year ago, we wanted to bomb the heck out of Assad. The American people, thank God, stood up and said, that's not going to happen, right? And now we want to bomb his enemies. I mean, it seems like the folks in charge just want to bomb somebody, right? We
got all these bombs, and they go stale if we don't use them.
Oh, God, it's just infuriating. My brother is still in. My whole family's military. Mom, dad, brother, all three uncles, stepmom, stepdad, grandfather. My whole family's military. My brother is still in. He's an Army infantry guy, airborne ranger. He's already been there as a company commander. He's lost guys. He's lost friends. I am not sending him back to that region for this nonsense, period. And going forward, when it comes to maybe the most difficult decision that a congressman has to make, which is to say when and if and when you declare war, that's, my brother is my threshold. Am I willing to send my brother overseas to risk his life for, conflict XYZ for this reason? If so, then all right, I'll sign the
I'll tell you, Jeffrey, these days I'm not so sure that the Congress has a whole lot to say about it. It seems like most of these wars are all done by presidential edict.
Yeah, isn't that nuts? You've got John Boehner going on TV saying, yeah, no, I support what we're doing. I support this military intervention. And Congress doesn't really have to vote on it. We're good. President has the authority. We're fine here. All is well. I mean, this is crazy.
Plausible deniability? You think plausible deniability plays into this?
I don't know.
I didn't vote for that war.
I just think the military-industrial complex is incredibly powerful, and I think that most of these folks just don't want to cross it. And I think I think the leadership today, I think the leadership when it comes to foreign policy has been pretty bad for a pretty long time. But I think the leadership today, it's like the blind leading the blind. We got to look like we're doing something. Let's pound our chests. Midterms are coming up. And it's just infuriating that this stuff is used for political purposes.
Jeffrey, we've got about 1 minute left, so I would like you to have an opportunity to provide a little bit of a summation before I hear that music in the background and the hook comes out and they drag us out of here.
All right, thanks, Gary. Well, I guess I'd say for folks that are listening in Northern Virginia, I'm the only candidate that wants to reduce spending, balance the damn budget. I'm the only candidate that wants to pursue a non-interventionist foreign policy and stop risking our service members' lives for politicians' egos and re-election campaigns and military-industrial complex profits. I'm the only candidate that wants to end the drug war. And I'm the only candidate that wants to eliminate all forms of corporate welfare, period. So thank you so much for having me, Gary. I appreciate it, man.
Jeffrey, I appreciate you being my guest tonight, and I wish you luck in your election. Hope you pull it off, man. You take care now. Well, folks, that's a wrap. I've done my share of barking at the moon for this week. You betcha. I'll see you again next Tuesday. Y'all have a good evening now. Good night. All righty. Well, that was a little different. I mean, it wasn't horrible hearing what that fella had to say, was it? I mean, I realize it was not our standard fare, but I'll tell you what got me interested in interviewing that guy. I went on a tirade in the YouTube commentary some time ago about how I didn't trust the Libertarians either. You know, you got Democrats, you got Republicans, and I don't really trust the Libertarians either. And somebody said, you just don't know what Libertarians stand for. You know, you've obviously got the wrong idea. They're really a great bunch of guys. And I got to thinking about it, and you know, as far off the rails as we've gone over the last 50 or 100 years, might not be a bad thing to have, you know, a couple of decades of libertarians run the show to kind of pull us back from the edge a little bit. But obviously, you know, if some of their ideals were implemented too quickly, you know, it could kill the patient, you know. But in any case, what do you guys think? I'm looking at the chat room now. Is he an independent? Well, he has the support of the Libertarian Party. I don't know if he's getting any money. Bill Still was the Libertarian president. Well, you know, Bill Still's all right, but, you know, I don't always agree with everything Bill Still says, you know. Hey, you know, if you agree with everything I say, shame on you. But, you know, the fact of the matter is there is no politician, there are no policies that are ever going to make everybody happy. I think best you can do is, you know, use some Kentucky windage and try to stay as close to the target as you possibly can. Some people will not fight till they are maybe getting close to their turn to being killed. Well, yeah, that's a good argument. You know, I sometimes, you know, question why we get involved in some of the war. You know, why the hell did we ever get involved in Afghanistan? I mean, what was the payoff? What did we get out of it? I mean, did we really improve things? And look at Libya. I mean, say what you want about that wacko Gaddafi. Libya was pretty stable and pretty reasonable until we went over there and killed Gaddafi, and now it's an absolute mess. So I'm not sure that, you know, this rush to go whoop up on somebody has really improved anything, you know, and that seems to be all we know how to do, is go bomb the hell out of them and force some kind of regime change. That seems to be all we know how to do. And it's kind of like a one-note Willie. And I'm looking at the United States, and I'll tell you, if there was any nation in the world that seriously needed regime change, it's the United States of America. But that's tall order. I'm not, you know, I'm not sure I'm not sure it would work out so well. Last big supply of oil, green. Hey, did you hear what's happening? You know, oil prices have dropped. I don't know if you all have heard, but oil prices are down to like $82 a barrel. I mean, frankly, everybody's broke. Nobody's got any money. You know, you got 50 million people that are on food stamps. You got like 90 million that can't find work. You know, nobody's got any money to be buying gasoline. So, you know, there's, you know, tons of the stuff available. And so the price of oil's gone down. Basically what happened is Saudi Arabia started pumping out oil like a mad dog because they thought they made an under-the-table deal that this was going to hurt Russia, because we're still trying to punish Russia over not letting us conquer Ukraine. So, you know, Saudi Arabia was going to hurt the Russians by flooding the market with a whole bunch of cheap oil. Well, problem is, you know, all of our U.S. domestic production of oil that's dependent on this fracking technology, those boys can't make any money at $82 a barrel. So, you know, it's unintended consequences. You know, you're trying to hurt the Russians, and we wound up shooting ourselves in the foot. Waiting for Putin to get ready, then join Arabs and attack Israel. I don't think anybody's got to attack Israel. I think Israel is slowly but surely killing itself. I think, frankly, if we just would ignore them and stop sending them our hard-earned money, let them fend for themselves, they would die the natural death that they deserve. But I don't think anybody needs to attack them. You know, they've become such a pariah in the world at this point with their antics that, you know, surely, you know, if there is such a thing as karma, they will get what they deserve. Right now, Hamas and ISIS seem to be deadly enemies. There does not seem to be, if anything, I think ISIS being a CIA concoction, if and when it's all over in Syria and Assad is finally overthrown, I suspect, you know, they'll go after Lebanon. They'll want to kick Hamas's ass. So ISIS will probably be used to remove Hamas, and you know, then they'll probably go over and start kicking Iran's ass. You know, that seems to be the game plan. What's the U.S. repossession? I'm not sure what that is. They get saying, yeah, well, you know, I mean, ISIS is the boogeyman of the day. Now, I disagree with Jeffrey on that. Frankly, you know, ISIS is like the gang that can't shoot straight. I mean, they're, you know, frankly, you know, against unarmed civilians, they look pretty tough. But, you know, in a real war, if we would get the hell out of Syria's way and let the Syrian military take care of ISIS, or God forbid, actually ally ourselves with the government of Syria, ISIS would not stand a chance. But that's not in the play. That's not in the plans. You know, we're using ISIS as our boogeyman to do our bidding in foreign policy. ISIS is our creation. They're as much a CIA front as Al Qaeda was, and Baghdadi is the new Osama bin Laden. So you be checking underneath your bed every night for that Baghdadi, because he's going to sneak out of there and cut your head off. Well, I think in the end, yes, we want to, those in power, those who actually pull the strings. The end game is to go to war with Russia and China. Okay, and it's a war that we can't win. You know, whether we win or lose doesn't matter. We still can't win. So yeah, what they don't want to happen is they don't want the economic system to totally implode and fail, and not have some major distraction that they can blame it on. Like, Ebola did it. Ebola did it. Ebola blew up the economy. Y'all was so scared of getting Ebola that you didn't go out and do your Christmas shopping like you were supposed to, and that's why the economy imploded. It's your fault. You was scared of Ebola, and you didn't get out there and spend your money. Therefore, by definition, the economy imploded, and it was your fault. So, see, they got to have somebody to blame. They don't want you looking where the real problem is. They don't want you looking at government. They don't want you looking at the banking system where the real problem exists. They want something to blame it on. So they'll keep pumping money into the system, trying to hold it together, as long as they possibly can until that plausible deniability excuse exists. And if they can't do anything else, they'll push the button and go to war with Russia and China. That'll get your mind off of it. Yeah. Yeah, an imploded economy would be the least of your problems. Anything else that we need to talk about before I bundle this thing up and post it up to YouTube? Chicken processed in China. Yeah. Yeah, I've got an Asian market near me where we do a lot of our shopping. And, man, they got some good-looking chicken there. I mean, their chickens are big, looking healthy, and they're free-range chickens that are raised right here in the Virginia Valley. Apparently some Koreans bought some farms up in the Shenandoah Valley, and some of them are raising cattle, some of them are raising chickens, and they sell them to the local Asian markets nearby. So I'm getting some really good chicken and some really good locally grown beef, from my local Asian market. It's, but yeah, I mean, I would not be buying frozen chicken tenders and, the processed food, the stuff that's shipped in frozen, because God only knows where that stuff's coming from. God only knows. Well, I tell you, Gary, I think to those in power, we are cattle. We are the herd. We need to be managed. We need to be cared for, tended to, fattened up for slaughter. You are either a source of revenue, or by definition, you are a useless eater. And old farts like me that actually, thought they were going to be able to collect on their Social Security payments that they've made all these years. It'd be real convenient if a whole lot of baby boomers just real quick drop dead. That would save the Social Security system. Well, I tell you, it's time for me to blow out of here, guys. I got to get this thing bundled up, packaged for YouTube, and so it is that time. I thank you all for spending your Tuesday evening listening to me bark at the moon. But that's it for tonight. I'll see you again next week. Good night, all.
Love of the old turnarounds. None of us are leaving here alive. Whoa, what will you say? What will you say? And what will you do? What will you do? What will you do? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you turn around? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you won't you turn around?